Good afternoon to you all. Activities at BDO Wealth Advisors is to engage with our clients, whether it's on telephone calls or in meetings, or more recently in virtual meetings. What we really enjoy is interacting with you. Every year we host investment seminars or conferences with presentations dealing with money, investments, and life. And while presentations on investments and return on investments are important, it's also important for us to take stock of the world around us and to give context to the here and now. I'm Alan Heynen, MD of BDO Wealth Advisors. Our presentation for the second half of 2020 takes on a different format. You're all logged on to a live presentation, and I'm shortly going to hand over to our guest speaker. He will talk for about 35 minutes, and after that, I'm going to hand over to Ricardo Teixeira, our COO of BDO Wealth Advisors, and Ricardo will handle a question and answer session. So please do post any questions that you have during the presentation so that we can deal with those afterwards. The whole session will be just under an hour. So I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker. Graham Codrington is an internationally recognized futurist. He specializes in the future of work. He helps us to understand the forces that will shape our lives over the next 10 years and how we can stay ahead to respond to those changes. Well, I don't think that there's a better time to be listening to the message that Graham is going to share with us today. So I'm going to hand over to you, Graham. Thank you.
And it's great to be with you in this crazy new virtual world, but wonderful to be part of this BDO session this afternoon. Thank you to everybody who's logged in and joined us. As Alan said, we're going to be together for an hour, and you will have an opportunity to ask some questions. In fact, you can put questions into the question box at any stage while I'm presenting. And Ricardo will be watching those questions, and he will then do a Q&A with me towards the end of the session. So please make sure that we are interactive. This is not meant to just be me speaking at you. In fact, we're going to also use a few interactive tools. I don't know if any of you have used tools like Mentimeter or AHA Slides, but I'd love you to be interactive with us. We don't just want this to be what could have just been a pre-recorded video. You've all put some comments in as you registered. Thank you for that. We've analyzed some of your questions. In fact, if we had tried to answer all the questions you asked us, we'd need about 5 hours together. So hopefully we'll answer some of them. But I want to be interactive as we go along. Won't you pick up your smartphone, or if you're watching on a computer, you can open up a secondary browser. Either connect with the QR code that you can see on the screen now, or go to the website address here, ahaslides.com/BDO. And what you should see, I'm just going to double check that we can see it. Go in, you can do it now. And you should see the first question that I've got up. This is just to make sure that we all using this and that we are getting into the system and working together. Just tell me where you are, what city, town, suburb, whatever you'd like to put in. And hit submit. Now, let's see if everybody's doing it. Here we go. We've only got 5 of you online at the moment. We know that there are more people watching. I'm genuinely serious about this. This isn't going to be one of those webinars where you can just sit back and do something else in the background and let me drone on in the background. We are going to ask you questions a few times, and I do want to use this system. So please do hop into the system. It's ahaslides.com/BDO. And there on your mobile phone, you'll see the question which just says, which city are you in? And if you look on my screen now, you'll see that we develop a little bit of a word cloud. I think some of you maybe weren't expecting this, right? You've got a little bit of webinar fatigue now. You were hoping that you could just sit in the background. We're not going to do that this time. Please do get involved. I see a few more of you logging on. So please carry on doing that while I get going. And don't forget that you can chat in the chat box. You can put in questions at any stage. About 5 years ago, I spoke at a conference at the London School of Economics. Bill Gates was the keynote speaker that day. And so I suppose I can technically say that I shared the stage with Bill Gates. He was the keynote opening speaker, and I did a breakaway session sometime in the afternoon. I was at his session. He wasn't at mine. But anyway, he was speaking about the future. He was speaking about the 2020s, about the decade that we now live in. And 5 years ago, he looked ahead and he said that he felt that there would be more change in the 2020s, in the period that he was talking about, than had been in his whole lifetime together. And one of the reasons for that, he said, was that the 2020s would be about when all of the building blocks that we have created over the last few decades, the building blocks of the internet, of global telecommunications, of computing power, of artificial intelligence, of technologies and all sorts of new devices that we've got, all of these things he believed were just building blocks. And when we start putting them together as a system, that's when he said the real interesting stuff begins to happen. And his argument 5 years ago was that we hadn't even started yet. We hadn't even begun to see what was going to happen in the world around us. Maybe let me give you an example to prove the point that he was trying to make. Let's take driverless cars, right? This is a technology that we know is coming. There's no doubt now that driverless cars are coming. You don't need me to come and tell you that. But here's what happens when we see a systems change. This is what Bill Gates was talking about. One driverless car on the road is interesting. It's cute. You might enjoy it. You might be able to sit back in a driverless car, get to work, either sleep, read a magazine or something. We really do get the power of driverless cars when all the cars on the road are driverless. So it's not when driverless cars, the technology arrives. It's not when they're made legal. The real systems change happens when driverless cars are compulsory. I just want to check with the tech team here. I'm getting a bit of an echo on my side. I don't know if that's coming across to everybody. I can handle it if nobody else is getting it, but just to see if there's anything I need to do to sort that out. So if driverless cars become compulsory, here's what happens. Every car can look at every other car, and the cars between them can come up with a system. You can drive the cars closer to each other. You can drive them faster than you've driven them before. All the cars will be able to work out what the best traffic pattern is for right now. And what that means is that we will get a much more efficient traffic system. In fact, MIT have done the modeling of this, and they suggest that we will get a 72% improvement in traffic flow when every car is driverless. We will also get a massive improvement in car safety. 96% of all car accidents are ultimately driver error. So if you take the driver out of the system, we have a remarkable improvement in both efficiency and safety in the system, which of course everybody wants. We will demand that we go to this. We will demand that we move quite quickly towards a compulsory system. And countries that make driverless cars legal over the next few years, I think will move quite quickly after that to make them compulsory. But then something else will happen. Think about what your car does for most of its life. The last 6 months, of course, it's done hardly anything. But even on a good day, right, before COVID, you would do what? You would drive into the office And then what would your car do for the whole day? Your car would sit in a car park somewhere. Well, it's South Africa, so I suppose we have to say we hope that that's what our car would do. Probably your car spends 90% of its life parked, doing nothing. These days, maybe even more than that. And for many of us, our car is a very expensive asset. What a waste, what a dismal return on investment, if you like, return on assets our cars are. Wouldn't it be better then if your car, your driverless car, took you into the office, and instead of parking for the day, because the car is driverless, you would be able to tell your car to go and do something else. So your car could go home, take the kids to school, pick them up in the afternoon, wouldn't need you involved. For some people, that is the biggest life changer of all, that you don't have to be mom or dad's taxi. The car could go and do what is actually being done now during COVID. Lots of deliveries, right? People using their cars to make deliveries and have this massive boom in e-commerce that we've seen in the last 6 months. Well, driverless cars make that even more accessible to all of us. Maybe you put your car into an Uber system and let your car make some money for you while it's out and about during the day, and at the end of the day, come and pick you up at the office. If some of this is making sense to you and you can picture this scenario, then go a step further with me, right? Why would we each have to own our own car? Why couldn't we simply put all the cars into an Uber system and we all just share them, right? Whenever you need a car, you just take the next car that comes along and take it to where you're going next. I think we've discovered in the last 6 months due to COVID that a lot of us, we thought our car was a status symbol. It really isn't, right? Especially when it's just a hunk of metal sitting in the garage. We don't do anything with it. I think a lot of us might have accelerated our mindsets towards thinking about sharing cars, not worrying about it. Some of you love your cars. You'd love to go driving. You're going to be like horse owners in the future. You know, horse owners today, they go off every weekend. They ride their horses. They take a photograph with the horse. They tell you about their horse on the Monday and how wonderful it was. That's going to be you and your car. The car you actually drive is going to be kept at a track somewhere outside the city. You'll visit it on the weekends and drive it. But every day when this scenario happens, I think that I'm onto something here, that we might see a network of compulsory, autonomous, shared cars in our future. None of us owning cars and all of the cars being compulsory driverless. It will change everything. Now, I'm not saying it'll happen next year. I'm not saying South Africa will be the first country to do it. Obviously not. But I think that this is a scenario. Now, what I'd like you to do is to go back to that AHA Slides website. So I see a few more of you have dived into it. You've got it now. Join me back there again. So go back to ahaslides.com/BDO, or if you've got a smartphone, you can just scan that QR code and it'll get you there. And I've moved on to another question. And you've got the same option now, except you've got multiple options. Which industries do you think will be affected if my scenario comes true? So don't argue with my scenario. Assume I'm correct. Assume that we have this now. We're in the future, and we've got this network of driverless cars that are compulsory. Every car is driverless. Every truck, every lorry, everything is driverless, and nobody owns, well, somebody of course owns them. That's, I suppose, part of the trick here. A big company, maybe it's Uber, maybe it's a bank, maybe it's the car manufacturers themselves. They never even sell the cars, they just put them into the system. Which industries do you think will be most affected? And thank you, a few of you are diving in here already. I think insurance, absolutely. I agree with you that insurance could be one of the big ones for a number of reasons. First of all, obviously, the risk has come down dramatically, so insurance premiums drop dramatically. But then it's even more than that. At the moment, insurance is one-on-one, right? You take out car insurance for your car, and you can't really negotiate with the insurance company because you've only got 1, 2, maybe 3 cars. If you have one person owning 1 million cars, well, the power relationship there has changed dramatically, and insurance premiums will collapse. I do work with short-term insurers, and they are already thinking about this. I see quite a few of you are making insurance one of your top choices here. Insurers absolutely have to think about this. Being in short-term car insurance is going to be one of the dumbest things you can do in a few years' time. Now, so that's one of them. There's some obvious ones that you're putting in here, and there's nothing wrong with the pointing out the obvious. I'm seeing a few not so obvious ones just off to the side here. Parking lots is an interesting one. Of course, we don't need parking lots we don't need garages in our homes. You can create an Airbnb out of your garage because you don't need that. But parking lots at your buildings, at shopping centers, these can all be changed. And that's going to have a massive knock-on effect to property prices. I see a few of you are putting that in. It'll have a massive impact on construction companies. We will have a huge glut of space. And if we add to the glut of space we've just created through COVID and people not going into the offices, my word, it's not a good future for construction in the next few years. Everything from, I see motels, I agree with you, airlines, I agree. Some people will choose to drive short destinations. Maybe Joburg, Cape Town's a bit far, but I would probably prefer to do Joburg, Durban in a driverless car. 180 k's an hour down the N2, we can get there in 4 or 5 hours, even sleep in the car, nice and relaxing, don't have to go through the airport, don't have to deal with security, don't have to deal with COVID at the moment. This could be something that impacts every industry. In fact, as you can see on the screen there, and thank you. We've got lots of people involved now, 62 contributions here. You can see that very, very quickly, we have basically listed every industry. I mean, I'm looking at the list there and wondering which industries are not listed, because pretty much every industry I can think of will be impacted. And that's just one example, right? That's just one example of a technology. What other technologies are coming our way in the next few years that might be equivalent to a driverless car in your industry and in your game? Everything from 3D printing to artificial intelligence, from robotics to a change in medicines and personalized medications. Literally, industry by industry, company by company, we can find plenty of examples of disruption. Now, of course, this is what we've been talking about for the last 5 or 6 years. This goes all the way back to what Bill Gates was saying 5 years ago. What I want to suggest to you this afternoon is that the COVID crisis that we are in has actually accelerated many of these trends. It's not as if we can say all of these other forces that are shaping the world around us are suddenly disappearing and we can only now think about COVID. Yes, of course, COVID is looming large for us, but all of these other forces are there, and in fact, some of them have been accelerated. And some of what is happening in the world right now is a massive reset opportunity. Or maybe we prefer the language, instead of reset, I prefer the language of reimagining. And that's where I think we find ourselves at the moment. The 2020s are indeed going to be one of the most disrupted decades of all time. And we've only just begun. COVID is only the first of a significant set of disruptors coming our way. From robotics and artificial intelligence and cloud and mobility, to climate change and sustainability issues, to shifts in global trade patterns, changes in geopolitics. The list is as long as our arm, and many of these themes are familiar. We've been talking about these for a while. What we now have at the beginning of the 2020s is a remarkable opportunity not to merely deal with COVID as a crisis and desperately hope that we can get back to normal as soon as possible. What I think that COVID is giving us is an opportunity to reset and reimagine, is an opportunity to say, okay, if this is what deep structural disruption looks and feels like, we didn't choose it, it didn't come at the right time, we couldn't ease into it, it's here now, and we've had to deal with it. COVID has smacked us in the face, it's hurting us, but we are learning something about the crisis. We are learning how to adapt. Many organizations shifting and changing and reimagining. Simple example, right? 2 friends contacted me in the last 3 days. Both of them are in the sort of personal training game. One's a Pilates instructor and one is a yoga instructor. The yoga instructor said to me, Graham, this is devastating. I've lost all of my clients and I've basically closed my studio. I don't know what to do. Can you help me? The Pilates person contacted me and said, I cannot believe what's happened to my business. I moved everything online. I've started to do Pilates courses online. Now I'm discovering that I can get students from anywhere in the world. And I'm getting people logging in from overseas. They're willing to pay in dollars and pounds. I'm charging them what they would expect to pay. I'm making more money than I've ever made before. And I might never go back to my studio because I'm actually enjoying doing it in a virtual way. You know, it goes back to that ancient story I think all of us heard when we did our MBAs, if you did. You know, the guy who was the European who was sent to Africa to see if he could sell shoes. And the one salesman writes a letter back to head office and says, no, there's no market here. Nobody on this continent wears shoes. The other salesperson writes back to his company and says, what an unbelievable market I found. Nobody here wears shoes. And this is what I mean by reimagination. And that we need to take this opportunity that COVID gives us to reimagine our world, our businesses. Let me give you an example from healthcare, right? Right now, we don't actually have a healthcare system. I'm not complaining about it. I think actually South Africa is doing remarkably well in responding to COVID in both private and public spheres. We could talk about that in the Q&A if you wanted to get into that a little bit further. Now, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about our COVID response. We don't have a healthcare system because you only go to your doctor when you are already sick. Think about that, right? You only go to your doctor when you are already sick. Your doctor doesn't keep you healthy. Your doctor makes you healthy when you're sick. So we have a sick care system, not a healthcare system. Now, I'm talking private now as well. There's not a comment on the public system here in South Africa. Wouldn't it be remarkable if you got a message from your doctor saying, Graham, you are going to be sick in 7 days' time? How could your doctor know that? Well, possibly your doctor could look at the Fitbit that you're wearing on your arm, have access to that data, which might include blood pressure, body temperature, biorhythms, sleeping patterns. You might give your doctor access if you take photographs of all your meals for Instagram. Well, give your doctor access to that. They can see what you're eating, right? And what you're drinking. Give your doctor access to your health app so that your doctor can see when you're going running. Maybe, and now in COVID, we know this one, the track and trace system, where we kind of want to track who you've connected with and who you're interacting with. Well, what happens if your doctor had access to that information and could alert you that you had a meeting planned with somebody? I'm talking when we get back face to face again, of course. You've got a meeting planned with somebody who's a little bit sick. Of course, we don't want a big brother thing. All of this could be anonymized. And of course, you know this is not your doctor actually looking at this information. This is a computer in your doctor's office looking at this information and anticipating when you might get sick and helping you to stay healthy. Now, some of you are thinking, well, how do we pay the doctor then? Surely the doctor only gets paid when I'm sick. So if I'm never sick, there's no financial incentive for the doctor to do this. If you had that thought, you're exactly where I want you to be, because now you're beginning to reimagine the whole system. Wouldn't this be remarkable? We only pay our doctors when we are healthy. You get to the end of the month, we got to the end of July, 31 days, healthy. Thank you, doctor. Take my debit order, because I only pay you when I'm healthy. If I get sick on the 6th of August, I don't pay you this month. Imagine how quickly your doctor would come running if your doctor stopped being paid when you got sick. I think there's something here, people. I think this could work. I think we could build a system like this. Maybe that's what NHI should become as we think about this. What we want is a healthcare system, right, that is proactive, it's not only reactive, it's predictive. Doesn't just respond when you're already sick. It actually predicts when you might be sick. It prevents you getting sick. It's personalized to you. So you're not just getting a one-size-fits-all medication. It knows who you are, gives you medication that you need, and everybody's engaged. Everybody's involved. Maybe participatory should have been compulsory, because sometimes everybody has to be in the system so that the system can do what all of us can't do as individuals. Some of you are ahead of me, but for those of you who are not, let me just make this obvious. What industry are you in, right? Any industry, whether it's logistics or education, whether it's retail or financial services. How can you reimagine your business, your industry to be more proactive, more predictive, more preventative, more personalized, more participatory? How can you build a reimagined system? That is what I believe the 2020s need to be about. If all you are trying to do is take what you've been doing in your industry for a number of years and make it cheaper and faster, and then you think that's better, I think you might discover that even if you survive the COVID crisis, you're going to be hit with serious disruptions that will hurt you badly in the rest of the 2020s. I think the organizations, the businesses, the industries that are able to completely reimagine are going to be the ones that survive the rest of the 2020s. And so for me, and this is what I want to leave with you this afternoon as a thought for where the world is going to go in the next 10 years. I think that we are going to see reimagination in industry after industry, every single industry. And I actually think that this COVID crisis we're living through now is going to accelerate some of that over the next little while. Let me give you a few examples, and thank you for many of you who asked your questions. A lot of you, more than half of you, said, please talk about politics, especially South African politics. And I think the COVID spotlight, right, has shone itself onto the South African politics, to be honest, on politics everywhere in the world. And it's shown that there's a mess, right? Everywhere. There are very few places in the world, maybe New Zealand, maybe Norway, are examples where you say, okay, they've done a good job, well done, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. But pretty much everywhere else, people are saying, really? Is this our government? And here in South Africa, this is not a new issue. Our politics is broken. We are struggling. So how do you reimagine politics? A lot of people in South Africa, a lot of people maybe watching today are saying, well, let's just get out of here. Okay, can't be fixed. It's too broken. Let's get out of here. Well, where would you go, right? So we're part of the BRICS, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China. Do any of those look like clever places to go right now? I wouldn't have thought so. Some of you are saying, oh, Graham, especially, sorry to be a little bit cheeky here, but especially maybe the white people listening today are saying, yeah, but I'm not going to those countries. What about US and UK, right? Well, if you're saying to me South African politics is broken, I'm going to leave the country and go somewhere else where politics isn't broken. Yeah, don't go to these two Muppets. What about these two guys? Do you even know who that the guy is in the top left there? That's Scott Morrison, by the way. He's the Australian Prime Minister. And don't worry, most Australians don't know who he is because he's their 6th Prime Minister in the last 10 years. I kid you not. So if you're moving to Australia because it's politics is better than South Africa, or you're going to Canada, that's Justin Trudeau. Just do a search for Justin Trudeau corruption scandal and see what comes up over the last month, right? I'm not saying that South Africa's fantastic, right? Okay, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying you can't run away and think that South Africa's politics is broken and everywhere else is fine. So what do we need to do? We've got to fix this, right? And we're not going to fix it by just keeping on doing what we've always done. We have to reimagine politics. I think globally, the best reimagination of politics is multi-party coalition democracy. I think the strongest countries in the world, the countries that have had the best response, are countries that change the ruling party regularly. It keeps everybody on their toes. Also countries where there are lots of small parties that have to work together to form coalitions. So what we need to do as South Africans is seriously strengthen the opposition parties. Each of our opposition parties acts like a mini ANC, like everybody's got to be on their own. As business people, as voters, as members of parties, we should step up and start talking about a different type of politics, a different way of running politics. If we're talking politics, we have to talk about corruption. We all know that we can't just let corruption continue. We have to see people in jail. The Daily Maverick just yesterday, I don't know if you saw this, remarkable bit of reporting in the Daily Maverick. Go and do a search for it. The 25 big scandals of the last 25 years under the ANC, all neatly laid out for you there, and only one of them has had charges brought. That's ridiculous. We can't keep going on like this. We have to force the ANC to reimagine their own internal processes. But just before we think it's only a government problem, let's not forget that there are very few corporate leaders in jail. How is there nobody in jail from Steinhoff right now? And they've got 175 billion rands worth of value removed, and they're trying to buy it off with 16 billion rand payout to shareholders. How is that okay? None of this is okay. We need to reimagine our systems, which means reimagining our economy. Let's be honest here, right? No matter what else was happening in the world, even without COVID, the world's economy is going through a massive shift at the moment. And we're in the wrong part of the cycle. The world doesn't need mines and agriculture as much as it needs digital and services. And South Africa has a lot of industries that are really important to it that are kind of from the industrial era, and not that many that are from the digital age. Regardless of who the government was, regardless of what else was happening, regardless of COVID, this would still be a problem. We have to move and accelerate the digital transformation of South Africa in the next 10 years. There are some very cool things happening. I don't know if you know that Amazon is moving their Africa web service, the third largest web server that Amazon Web Service owns, is going to be placed in Cape Town. Over the last year, they've been employing hundreds of people, building new offices, and a number of other big international digital companies are coming into South Africa. So this is happening. And our economy is transforming. It just needs to move faster. COVID's been a bit of a hit to us, but it might also be an opportunity to shift even faster. Here's a graph. I will show you how to get the slides that I'm using today, so you can look at this in a little bit more detail in your own time. But this was some research McKinsey did 2 months ago, in which they looked at technologies that people were using during lockdown, and asked people, what new technologies are you using? The vertical axis here is how much new the technologies are. That one right at the top over there is telemedicine. People phoning their doctors, using online rather than going to hospitals. And then the horizontal axis, so the further across things are this way, that's whether people expected to continue to use these technologies after lockdown. Now, you can get involved again here. please go back to that AHA slides again and just say, what technologies do you believe will maintain increased use after lockdown? Again, just add for us there so that we can get a word cloud going. What McKinsey looked at was things like virtual meetings, conferences like we're doing now, the development of virtual teams. They looked at retail, e-commerce. There has been a massive bump in e-commerce in the last month. Mr. Delivery and Take-A-Lot are having their best months ever at the moment. That Checkers app, what's it, 60/60, they can't believe their luck and timing in terms of people demanding their services. Education, learning and development in the corporate space, the way we do conferences is going to change. Telemedicine, for me, telemedicine is probably one of the biggest ones. And again, this is the point. So thank you for those who've started to put in there. Online shopping, food delivery, restaurants who are cooking food and then delivering them at home. I think that's going to go on for a long time. Some of us want to go back to restaurants, but some of us also just like good restaurant food and we're happy to eat it at home. Online shopping, a lot of you are saying that. I agree completely. But you're all, I'd see, thank you. You're filling that up nicely. Have a look at your screen. You can see that word cloud growing. We know this, right? We know that we are now at a moment where things are changing because of the crisis. But a lot of these changes are going to continue well into the future. I mean, think about it. We are going to reimagine everything from climate change, as we now realize we can deal with big issues. We can deal with climate change maybe faster and better than before. We're going to reimagine our workplaces and our flexibility. I'm not saying everybody's going to work from home forever, but I think that we're going to be more open to working from anywhere. Some of you are not enjoying working from home. You're surviving a crisis while you're stuck at home. But I think you've disconnected from the office, and we'll be working from anywhere. This goes even further, right? Geography is dead. We can now look anywhere in the world for new team members. They don't have to live in the city where our office is. We can look anywhere for clients if we've got services that can be delivered digitally. And I suppose this is what I wanted to leave you with. Instead of just a long list of all the things I think might happen in the 2030s, what I really wanted you to imagine with me was what would happen if, instead of us being desperate to go back to normal, desperate to get our economies back to where they were, desperate to get back to all the things we know, what happens if we take this opportunity? This is not just a little shake-up. You can't just grit your teeth and power through lockdown and then moan at the government and ask them to remove the regulations and get back to normal as quickly as possible. We're going to be in a state of deep disruption for a serious period of time. Have you been watching BBC News or Sky News the last few days? Have you seen Melbourne has gone down to essentially level 5 lockdown? As of tonight, all shops, all restaurants, all non-essential services, all hairdressers shut in the whole of Victoria, Melbourne, Australia. We've seen the mess in America. Boris Johnson has been saying that he thinks he might have to lock down London again. Paris is saying they probably will have to lock down. Spain is saying they probably have to lock down. South Korea is starting to warn schools they might be closing again. Israel is closing their schools again. This is not a regulatory issue. This is not us saying to the government, sort yourself out. Yes, there are things our government does need to sort out, and communication and the alcohol ban and things like that. But we're in for the long haul here with a disruption, whatever the regulations are. And then there'll be more disruptions and more disruptions and more disruptions and more disruptions. This is what it feels like to live through deep structural change. And like it or not, I think this is what the rest of the 2020s feels like. And in this environment, one of my mentors and gurus, Peter Drucker, passed away a number of years ago. He famously said that the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not actually the turbulence itself. It is to act with yesterday's logic. Essentially, living in tomorrow's world using yesterday's rules is the biggest and easiest way to collapse, to die, to mess up. So, what do we need to reimagine? I think the answer to that question is everything. From politics and economic systems to the rules of your industry to how you live your life. I think the 2020s is going to be the most disrupted and disruptive decade, maybe of all time, but certainly of our lifetimes. And that by 2030, I don't know if we can even now imagine what that will look like, but it will look very different to today. And we have the opportunity to just be caught up in a whirlwind of change, always reacting and responding in crisis mode. Or we can take the opportunity that COVID gives us now to build some adaptability, agility, flexibility, resilience into our systems. That's probably not something that you can just do yourself. That's probably something, and this is why I was thrilled to be working with the BDO team on this, because we're all going to need some help. We're going to need people to help us spark our imaginations. We have to get through the crisis first and then engage with what happens afterwards. From a wealth advisory perspective, if all you're listening to the session for today is to think, well, where are the winners and losers? We're going to need people who are thinking, who are looking at the systems, not the individual parts anymore, but looking at the systems and the systems change. And that's how we're going to get through this together. So, Ricardo, I'm going to invite you to come back in and to join me. I know you've been looking at the Q&A box. I hope there's a few good questions coming through, and we can take questions now. And then I've got just a minute or two towards the top of the hour to just wrap everything together with a nice little picture that will hopefully help people. But thank you, everybody. There's an invitation to reimagine, and I hope that you join me in accepting that invitation. Ricardo, back to you.
Thank you, Graham. I think you've made a very good case for the fact that we live interdependently with the world around us. And I think our lives are largely shaped by the environment and how we engage with that. I think, Graham, you've put forward, a great sort of stage for what promises to be an exciting decade filled with innovation, diversity, and definitely a lot of reimagining of how we're going to live, work, and play. I see there are a couple of comments coming through, Graham. So if we bring you back on screen, you can let's dive straight into the conversation. One question that's come up now, which I'd like you to sort of address for us, is how can we best prepare for this world of work in the 2030? What are the skills and how do we prepare ourselves for it, Graham?
Sure. I mean, I suppose that's the million-dollar question in response to what I've said. And if we wanted to seriously and properly answer that question, we'd probably need a week or two's workshops. But to give some headlines to that, I think there are three levels of response to how do we prepare. The first is a mindset shift. I think that those people who have a belief that the world will basically stay the same with incremental improvements, with slight improvements each year, each quarter, each month, I think you're going to really, really struggle. I think we have to mentally prepare ourselves for the fact that things change all the time. And this is probably maybe a too controversial example, Ricardo, but you know, this issue of the alcohol ban in South Africa. You know, alcohol was banned and then it was unbanned. And then everybody said, oh, okay, it's unbanned, and the restaurants opened and started serving and people started buying alcohol. And then it was banned again. In my mind, that was one of the least surprising things that's happened in the last 6 months. And yet a whole lot of people fell apart when the second ban came. It was like, how is that even possible? And I think it's just a mental switch you have to switch on to say disruptive change is now the norm. I don't like the phrase the new normal. I think it's a bit of a cliche and a bit overused already. But how about this one? No normal is the new normal. And maybe that's the mental shift. The second thing that we need to do is I think that we need to build adaptability into our systems, into our DNA. So too many companies, their default setting is everything's going to be the same until we change it. I think the default setting needs to be everything's allowed to change. I'll give you a simple example, right? What are your budgets worth this year? What I mean by that is you spent quite a few weeks at the end of last year setting your budget and your targets and your plans for 2020. Are you relying on those budgets and targets and plans at the moment, or have you basically shredded that document and you're just making it up as you go along at the moment? Now, obviously, 2020 is an extreme example of how wasted basically weeks and weeks of strategic planning can be when you're in a very VUCA environment. But actually, let's be honest, you and me, just you and me. Last year's budget was not that much more useful than this year's, and the year before wasn't that much more useful, because by the time you get to June, July, every year for the last 4 or 5 years, you've realized that the market wasn't quite what you expected to be. Something unexpected has happened, something has shifted, a new competitor's come in, a major client has moved on, staff has changed, something's happened. So why do we continue with this illusion of an annual cycle, this illusion of control given our budgets and targets? Why don't we build budgets and targets that are adaptive, flexible, agile, resilient? You know these words because we talk about these words. We now need to translate them into our organizational structures and systems. And then I think, Ricardo, the third thing is that we do need to realize that the main theme of the 2020s is digital transformation. And we all have to get much better at living and working and being comfortable in a digital space. And to be honest, I think that's the biggest gift that COVID will leave us. I think that will be the biggest lasting legacy, is that some people who were saying, no, we can't do online meetings, no, IT won't let us do X, Y, or Z. I was working with a mine just last week that said for the last 2 years, they have been trying to get their IT department to authorize and implement electronic contracting. And in the 3 days before lockdown, IT implemented and delivered it, and it's working beautifully. And so I think COVID has forced us all to up our digital game. And we're never going back again. We're never going back from that. I'm not saying all meetings will always be online, but I think we'll always be comfortable with online, digital, e-commerce, virtual options. And that will stand us in good stead. Now, go further and add cloud, mobility, automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and I think we can accelerate some of those tech digital transformation trends. So for me, it's about developing a skill set in the digital space that will help you as well. Long answer, but it was a great question.
Great. Thank you, Graham. I think you're quite right. It's all about our mindsets and having that ability to adapt to our environment. You prompted the question around schools earlier, and I'm intrigued, Graham. Should we reopen schools? Or do we remain as we are online?
Are you just wanting a yes or no, or can I give a bit of detail?
Got a minute.
Look, wow, what a tough question, hey? Because you can see both sides. So yes, we should be reopening schools because schools have an absolutely essential function in society, and it's not just the education of your children. As most of you know, it's about child care, looking after your children so you can go to work. It's about socialization and mental wellness and psychological health of ourselves and our children. And I think that's even more important in the poor areas and the townships. A lot of township parents who have jobs have to go to those jobs. And they leave early in the morning, and if the kids don't go to school, what do the kids do? And so there's one argument which says that schools are not a safe place because of COVID. But if the kids are just playing around in the streets of the township with each other, they're not safe there anyway. So they might as well be in a structured environment. So there's definitely an argument for yes. But then every country in the world that has opened schools before we went over the peak, South Korea did it, Israel did it, Denmark to a lesser extent, the United States, they're right in the middle of this conversation, the UK as well. They've all seen spikes in COVID, because although children don't, luckily with COVID, don't seem to be hugely affected. Only a very small fraction of children their own health is affected. It seems fairly clear that they can carry the disease. So they can take it from a teacher at school to a parent or grandparent at home. And schools can become super spreader environments. So yes or no? Honestly, Ricardo, I wish I just had an answer. I can see both sides of the equation. What I would say is this: do not open a school unless you can put safety first. Safety of the teachers, safety of the other staff, safety of the students. That means you need to have a way of physically distancing. Everybody must wear their masks. They must keep the windows open, be outdoors as much as possible, sanitize everywhere. The government really has a duty of care to provide that for public schools. Private schools, obviously, hopefully there's an expectation parents understand some of their school fees are going to be allocated towards that safety equipment. I think we need to take that safety very, very seriously. If we can do that, if a school can do that, I think they can tentatively open then and keep vigilant. If they have to close because they have a little bit of an outbreak and they quarantine for a week or two and then open again, so be it. So it's probably saying, yes, open schools with precautions, being prepared to close and open for the next 12 to 18 months as needed. It's not easy, is it? It's not easy.
Thank you. I think your answer is quite clear. It's adaptable. And so that skill set and that mindset is going to take us through into the future. I think let's wrap it up there,
Ricardo,
Graham.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can I just then add something onto that? Because if you're not a parent, this is still an important question and issue to think about, because let's say you've got staff working for you who've got kids, school-going aged kids. If their school suddenly has to close because there's a hot spot, a COVID flare-up, they might be impacted in their work. And you'd have to be a really monstrous employer to not care whether the parents on your staff are impacted by school closures. As a society, we all have to be adaptable, and maybe the word here is empathetic and caring as well. And realizing that for the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to have to really understand that there are multiple ways in which everybody in your community is going to be disrupted. And we're going to have to bring that into our HR practices and our thinking about staff engagement and staff care. So this is not just an issue only for those who have school kids. I think it's an entire societal issue. And that's why I think it's such a big talking point.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you for sharing your perspective, your vision for the future. I think if we can close there. I think regardless of how the future plays out, regardless of how innovation sort of comes forward to the front or not, the world that we live in and the world around us will most certainly influence how we live, work, and play. And it's important to take stock of these trends, take stock of the forces that Graham's shared with us today that are shaping our world that we will live in. However, I think it's quite important to appreciate that you may not control and we don't control those forces that will shape our lives. What we can do is actually take a lead from Graham, and that is look at how we react and how we behave. And that will determine how we engage with the world that we live in. And that's really where we come into the play. At BDO Wealth Advisors, our role is to make sure we help you focus on what you can control. Our purpose is to bring clarity, order, and direction to your financial life so that you can live a life of meaning and
live the best life that you can with the money that you have. So Graham, I think you've most certainly brought a lot of clarity and understanding to the forces that will shape the world that we are going to live in the 2030s. And I think you've given us the tools, at least a foundation, for building the tools of mindset and attitude that will help us adjust our outlook of how we will live and thrive in the 2030s. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for a very entertaining and inspiring conversation. It's been wonderful hosting you. And thank you for sharing your vision for the future, Graham. And I'd like to thank you, our clients and guests. Thank you for joining us today. I do hope that you've taken some form of personal benefit from the conversation, be that a cue or an inspiration of how you can adjust your outlook on how you would live in the 2030s. And with that, what adjustments or what plans should you make to make sure that your personal financial planning meets that ability to live the life that you want to live? Thank you for making the time to join us. I know that we have not been able to make eye-to-eye contact for this event, but I'm reassured by the monitor in front of me that we are broadcasting to a live event, to a live audience. So thank you for making the time to join us, and thank you for your participation. On behalf of the BDO Wealth Advisors team, stay well, stay safe, and until we connect again, goodbye.